introduce a patient of mine and friend. We asked, so some years ago, we actually started with, so the first one that AIM ever did was have some patients kind of talk about their experience. And it's almost always gone very well. I mean, people really like to hear that kind of personal touch. Everybody has a story, of course. We asked a few people to talk today just to kind of, because they've had similar experiences to the things we wanted to talk about. And so first is Valerie, if you want to come up. She's going to just talk about her experience. So I'll let you introduce yourself otherwise. So please welcome Valerie.
Hi, everybody. My name is Valerie, and I don't sing. That was a great song, by the way. I'm going to be singing it later. Between 2017 and 2018, I participated in a clinical trial for Keytruda. The second time I was diagnosed with melanoma 2 years and 6 months ago, I was right in the middle of a 2-year master's program at the University of Michigan School of Social Work. I had waited 5 years from the first time melanoma showed up in my life to go back to school. I had just started to relax, thinking that maybe I had dodged the cancer bullet. Then, during a routine yearly skin exam, the dermatologist found a tiny spot that he said looked like nothing. It was probably pigmentation on the original site of my first melanoma, which was my head. 2 weeks later, dermatologists at the cancer center found 2 more spots next to the original one. And before I knew it, I was diagnosed with stage 3 melanoma. That re-diagnosis changed everything. Within a month, I was at Dr. Lau's office talking about possible admission to a clinical trial. Because the trial was closing, I had about 4 weeks to decide whether to take part. A decision that was made particularly difficult by the fact that I had no visible presence of disease in my body. Doing so would mean canceling a research trip to Peru and a family vacation. It would mean taking a medication whose side effects were not fully known. And most of all, it would mean disrupting my family's life with routine hospital visits and possible complications. So how did I make the decision to participate in the clinical trial? Not too long ago, one of our daughters asked me why I chose to do so, because I wasn't sick, so she wondered. I told her that for me, it came down to probability and science. The fact that melanoma had come back meant that it might come back again, and the fact that Keytruda was working on people and visible presence of disease might mean that if I had any stray cells in my body, it might work on me too. What I did not tell her was that she was 11 years old at that point, and I would have done whatever it took to see her become an adult. My infusion started in the summer of 2017, and for the most part, participating in the clinical trial was not too terrible. I showed up at the cancer center every 3 weeks for a blood draw and a 45-minute infusion. For the first 3 months or so, I got a headache and sluggishness that felt like a hangover and an upset stomach. Symptoms usually settled into a perpetual dry mouth for the next 6 months or so I carried a water bottle like everyone else. Unless I told you that I was a cancer patient, you probably wouldn't have known it. I consider myself an optimist, and I found that it came in handy for the majority of the trial. I focused on living and doing what I loved. I continued to exercise regularly and ate as well as possible. I continued to study because my studies kept me engaged and focused on the future. Yes, it was challenging to work, study, and manage a household with 2 children during treatment, but I needed to have something other than cancer going on. I needed to live this normal life. And Susan, Diane, and Dr. Lau supported my scheduling and many appointments around my life. I had supportive family and friends who kept our family fed for months at a time, and my husband, Christian, who made our life as normal as possible. Even our girls' Catholic school staff started praying for me, even though I can't really remember the last time I went to church. But in March of 2018, about 8 months in, things started to change. I started feeling incredibly sore all the time, regardless of my activity level. My joints ached and my hands swelled, so I stopped wearing my engagement ring and my watch. I felt hungover every morning, and it took hours to wake up, which made it really hard to get two little girls off to school. I wasn't really hungry. My head ached constantly. I stopped exercising because I simply couldn't. If I even tried to walk, I'd get too dizzy and wouldn't even make it a block. Dr. Lau suggested skipping an infusion and netting it at the end, but I just wanted to be done with it. I told him, just do it. Go ahead. So when I sat on the infusion chair, a nurse I'd gotten to know pretty well mentioned that I looked unusually tired. It's interesting how when we experience this long-term, slowly worsening symptoms, we forget how we used to be and how we used to feel. And ill becomes a new normal. And if you espouse the very American value of never quitting, then you're probably as terrible as I was at knowing when it was time to say uncle. My body quit the clinical trial for me. So knowing what I know now, I have some hard-earned wisdom to share with you. If you're a melanoma patient in treatment or considering immunotherapy as treatment, before you do anything else, think about how you can best support yourself emotionally and physically. If you're able, gather your family and friends around you, and if they are willing, let them take care of you. Quilt, read, golf, do whatever it is you love, as long as you're up for it. Know your family history of autoimmune disease and be vigilant about the signs your body gives you during treatment. And above all, treat your body like the hardworking vessel it is. At the hospital, when you attend your appointments, connect with your providers. Getting to know Susan, Diane, and Dr. Lau has been one of the most rewarding parts of being a patient. Susan and Diane have treated me with such care and kindness from the very beginning, and Dr. Lau's tireless energy and humor has helped minimize stress during appointments. Knowing them as people made my visits to the cancer center more about seeing friends and hearing about their hobbies, children, and grandchildren, rather than about potential bad news and complications. Lastly, I'm here to tell you that if you choose to participate in a clinical trial, you will get no special prize for making it through all the infusions. You will not please your oncology team any more than if you choose to listen to your body and quit early if you need to. No one will lose respect for you because you elect to protect your quality of life. Your work ethic should never override your body's needs, ever. Now, if you're a provider who serves people with melanoma, I have a challenge for you. I urge you to be vulnerable. This will be hard for you because you're in a most challenging line of work where you see real suffering daily. One of the most meaningful moments in treatment happened one day when I was sitting in a room at the cancer center, anxiously waiting to hear about the results of a CT scan. I had a cold and a cough and was worried about what the chest scan would show. While looking at labs, Dr. Lau casually asked if I'd looked at scan results online, and I said, nope. He stopped typing and turned to me and said, are you worried about them? I admitted that I was. Before that, no cancer provider had ever asked me how I felt. That question changed everything for me. It gave me permission to speak up if I was ever worried in the future. Providers, don't be afraid. Don't let yourself harden. Get to know your patients. Ask them how they're feeling. Ask them about their interests and their children. Those connections make a huge difference in the fight against isolation that cancer causes in people. Which brings me to the most important thing I'll say today. A big change needs to happen when it comes to melanoma and mental health. The first time I was diagnosed, I received the news in the mudroom of our new home. The resident who delivered the news was kind and even offered me his personal phone number. But when he hung up and I did as he instructed and Googled melanoma, I nearly collapsed from fear at what I read. All I could think about was, who would raise my 6-year-olds to adulthood if I died according to these statistics I was reading? When melanoma came back, I again got the call when I was alone. I was in my car at the parking lot of Kellogg after an eye exam. I couldn't see to drive. And soon after, when I was in the dermatologist chair getting what I thought was one new lesion removed, and it turned out to be 3, I didn't know what to do or say, and neither did the dermatologist. And most recently, when I was told my adrenal glands had stopped working and I would have to be on medication for life, I was alone again in a hallway at work. Each of these times, I was offered world-class medical services, professionalism, and state-of-the-art immunotherapy, but no psychological support whatsoever. No tools for dealing with fear, anger, and isolation that comes with cancer and its fallout. No, as a patient who prides herself on keeping it together, I will tell you that it was incredibly difficult for me to ask for mental health services the few times I felt low or scared. Diagnosis is no time to be alone, but most of all, to feel alone. I challenge you as providers to demand that mental health support be available to every patient you see. I certainly don't expect those of you who are trained as oncologists or dermatologists or researchers to be therapists. But if your collective voice demands that each time you deliver a terrible diagnosis or a less than optimal CT scan result, you follow it with, "Would you like to talk to someone?" rather than waiting for the patient to ask, you will revolutionize the way you care for patients. It has been 1 year and 8 months since the clinical trial ended for me. For a while after I quit, I was left mourning who I used to be. Although immunotherapy is supposed to be easy, and it is compared to chemo, I did not get out unscathed. I now take twice daily hydrocortisone for adrenal insufficiency. My ears ring constantly. I have symptoms of early menopause, and my libido has changed. I've had to give up my beloved 5 a.m. runs because I can't wake up for them, and change my diet for the sake of feeling well. I have to carry an injection when I travel, just in case I can't take my pills. I basically had to come to terms with the fact that I am now living with chronic disease. The new me, my new identity, was very hard to accept. But while there has been collateral damage from melanoma, there has been collateral beauty too. These days, I hardly ever sweat the small stuff, which probably explains why my house will never be as clean as it should be. My daughter's teen years, which so many dread, have been a welcome adventure, even on the days when the door gets slammed, which is a lot of days. There's a fearlessness in everything I do and try, because not knowing how much time I have left frees me from fear of failure. Living in a body that doesn't always cooperate has made me much, much kinder toward others. There has been so much disappointment, but so much awe as well. Ultimately, whether we want it or not, cancer defines every single one of us in this room. After the trial ended and the dust settled, and I was told I would have to get a med alert bracelet because my new condition could be lethal, the bracelet business reminded me that I was approaching death faster than most, and I wanted nothing to do with it. I must have made a face when Diane mentioned it, because Dr. Lau, whose humor I'd come to appreciate, said, "Or you could get a tattoo." Remember that? But I didn't want a tattoo that defined me by my disease. I love my life, and cancer has helped me define it. My core belief is that even though there are no guarantees on how long I'll live, I choose to take it all in, all the beauty and the chaos and the challenges for however long it lasts. So recently, shortly after my 47th birthday and 8 years after being diagnosed with melanoma the first time, I did get my first tattoo. And rather than defining me by my illness, it defines me by my core belief. My tattoo says, "I lived." Thank you.